I found her work uniform in the closet on a Thursday morning. Black cocktail dress, name tag still pinned to it. She told me she quit the bar 18 months ago. The name tag said differently. It was dated 3 weeks prior. My name is Trevor Walsh. I'm 71 years old, Australian, retired from telecommunications engineering about 8 years back. Moved to Thailand 5 years ago on a retirement visa. Decent superannuation payout, own my condo in Bangkok outright, comfortable pension coming in every month. Not wealthy by Western standards, but in Thailand I live well enough. Better than I ever did in Melbourne, that's for certain. The weather suits my arthritis, the cost of living suits my budget, and for 3 years I thought the woman I was with suited my heart. Her name was Anchan, 31 years old when we met, 28 when I first saw her working behind the bar at a place off Sukhumvit Soi 22. Not one of the notorious go-go bars, mind you. Just a regular expat pub, sports on the televisions, decent fish and chips, cold singha on tap. The kind of place where retired blokes like me would meet up twice a week to watch the football and complain about visa runs. She worked there. Friendly smile, good English, remembered your drink order. That's how it started. Nothing sleazy. Nothing I'm ashamed of. At least not in how it began. I was a regular for about 4 months before I worked up the nerve to ask her out properly. She'd stayed back after her shift a few times to chat with me when the bar was quiet. We'd talk about Australia, about Thailand, about her family upcountry in Nakhon Ratchasima. She told me she was working to support her daughter, 8 years old at the time. Father was a Thai man who'd left when the girl was still a baby. Anchan was raising her alone with help from her mother. She said the tips at the bar were good, better than office work, and she needed the money for her daughter's school fees. Private school, better education, better future. I respected that. A woman working hard for her child. What's not to admire in that? When I finally asked her to dinner, she said yes. We went to a nice Japanese place near ASOC. She dressed beautifully. We talked for 3 hours. She was intelligent, funny, affectionate. Touched my arm when she laughed. Asked questions about my life. Seemed genuinely interested in my stories about working on telecom projects across Southeast Asia in the 90s. I felt seen. That sounds stupid for a man my age to say, but it's true. After my divorce back in Australia 7 years earlier, I hadn't felt that kind of attention from a woman. My ex-wife had spent the last decade of our marriage treating me like I was furniture. Anchan made me feel alive again. We started seeing each other regularly after that, 2 or 3 times a week at first, then more. Within 2 months, she'd introduced me to her daughter, Ploy. Sweet kid. Shy at first, but warmed up to me. I'd bring her little gifts, nothing extravagant, just things kids like. Coloring books, hair clips, sometimes ice cream. Anchan would smile watching us together. She told me I was good with children, that Ploy needed a father figure. That should have been my first warning, really, but I took it as a compliment. About 4 months into our relationship, Anchan told me she wanted to quit the bar. She said the late nights were hard on her, that she wanted more time with Ploy, that the environment wasn't what she wanted anymore. She said if she had help with expenses, she could leave and find daytime work instead. Maybe receptionist work, maybe retail, something with normal hours. I offered to help. Not in a transactional way. I want to be clear about that. I cared about her. I wanted her life to be easier. And honestly, I didn't love the idea of her working in a bar environment anymore. Men flirting with her for tips, that sort of thing. So I started giving her money each month, 35,000 baht, enough to cover her rent, her daughter's school fees, and basic living expenses. She quit the bar 2 weeks later, or so she told me. For the next 2.5 years, I believed her. I genuinely believed she'd left that job behind and was working reception at a dental clinic near On Nut. She'd leave the condo around 9 in the morning, come home around 6 in the evening, normal working hours. She'd talk about her day, about the dentist she worked with, about difficult patients. It all sounded completely legitimate. Why wouldn't I believe her? I had no reason not to trust her. She was affectionate, attentive, caring. We had a good physical relationship. She cooked for me. We'd watch movies together in the evenings. On weekends, we'd take Ploy to the park, or to the zoo, or shopping at Terminal 21. We were a family, or at least I thought we were. Looking back now, I can see the signs were always there. I just didn't want to look at them properly. That's the thing about being naive. It's not that you can't see the evidence, it's that you choose not to process it. Your brain protects you from uncomfortable truths by manufacturing explanations that let you keep believing what you want to believe. The first thing that should have bothered me was her phone. She was constantly on it. I mean constantly, messaging people all day long. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd say it was her friends from work, or her friends from her hometown, or her cousins. Always a reasonable explanation. And the way she'd explain it, with that sweet smile and that soft voice, I'd feel guilty for even asking. Like I was being controlling. Like I was the one with the problem. So I'd back off. That happened probably once a week for the entire 3 years. Me noticing something, asking about it, her explaining it away, me feeling bad for asking. Then there was the money situation. I was giving her 35,000 baht monthly, but she'd often ask for extra. Medical bills for her mother, school expenses for Ploy, motorcycle repairs. Her sister needed help. Always something. And I'd give it to her because I'm not a tight man with money. I've got enough. What's the point of having it if I can't help someone I care about? But over 3 years, I must have given her close to 2 million baht on top of the regular monthly amount. That's what, about 60,000 Australian dollars? For a woman who supposedly had a full-time job at a dental clinic. Where was her salary going? I never saw evidence of her spending it on herself. She didn't buy expensive clothes or jewelry. She didn't go out with friends much. So where did it all go? I convinced myself it was going to her family. Thai culture values family support, I'd tell myself. She's responsible for her mother and her daughter. That's admirable. That's what good people do. So I kept giving her money without really questioning where it went. That was my naivety showing through. I wanted to believe I was the good farang, the generous boyfriend, the man who understood Thai culture and supported his partner's family obligations. I wanted to be different from those bitter expats who complain about Thai women and money. I wanted to prove I was better than that. Her schedule started changing about 18 months into our relationship, which would have been around 6 months after she supposedly quit the bar. She started having evening obligations more frequently, visiting her mother up country, helping her sister with childcare, taking Ploy to extra tutoring sessions that ran late, going to temple on specific evenings for special ceremonies. Always reasonable explanations. Always said with that apologetic smile. Always accompanied by extra affection when she came home. She'd cuddle up to me, tell me she missed me, thank me for being understanding. And like an idiot, I'd feel good about being the understanding boyfriend. I'd feel mature and secure for not being jealous or demanding. I'd tell myself this was what a healthy relationship looked like. Trust, space, independence. The late-night phone calls started around the same time. Her phone would ring at 11 at night, midnight, 1 in the morning. She'd always take the call in the other room. When I'd ask about it the next day, she'd say it was her mother with some family issue, or a friend having a crisis, or work-related even though it was the middle of the night. I'd think it was odd, but I'd push the thought away. Don't be paranoid, Trevor. Don't be that suspicious old farang who doesn't trust his younger girlfriend. That's what I'd tell myself. She changed her phone password around the 2-year mark. We'd never been the sort of couple who went through each other's phones, but her phone had never been password protected before. One day it was, and when I mentioned it casually, she got defensive, snapped at me actually, which was unusual for her, said she had a right to privacy, that she wasn't my property, that she didn't like me treating her like she had something to hide. I apologized immediately, felt terrible for even bringing it up, told her she was absolutely right, that I was being unreasonable, and she softened then, kissed my cheek, said she knew I loved her, but that I needed to trust her more. So I did. I trusted her more, or I tried to. My friend Graham saw her once, about a year ago. He mentioned it to me carefully, the way you do when you're about to tell someone something they won't want to hear. Said he'd seen a woman who looked very much like Anchan near Nana Plaza late one evening. He wasn't certain it was her, he said. Bangkok's a big city, lots of Thai women. Easy to mistake someone. But he thought I should know. I told him he was mistaken. Got a bit defensive, actually. Told him Anchan doesn't go anywhere near that area. That she's not that kind of woman. That he should be more careful about spreading rumors that could damage someone's reputation. Graham backed off immediately, apologized, said he was sure he was wrong, but I could see in his face he didn't believe that. He knew what he'd seen. I just wasn't ready to hear it. There were other things, small things that accumulated like sediment in my mind. The way she'd sometimes smell like cigarette smoke even though she didn't smoke. The way she'd come home at 7 or 8 in the evening and go straight to shower before even greeting me properly. The new clothes that would appear in her closet that I hadn't seen her buy. The expensive cosmetics in the bathroom. The times I'd try to reach her during the day and she wouldn't answer for hours. Always explanations. Always reasonable. Phone was on silent. Was in a meeting at the clinic. Was helping her mother with something. Had to run errands. Every single time. A plausible reason. I had a strange pain in my chest during that 3rd year that wouldn't go away. Went to see a doctor at Bumrun Grad. They ran tests. Heart was fine. Lungs were fine. Doctor asked if I was under stress. I said no. Life was good. He prescribed some medication for acid reflux and suggested I might be experiencing anxiety. I didn't believe him at the time. Now I realize my body knew what my mind refused to accept. The stress was killing me slowly, even while I smiled and pretended everything was fine. The discovery happened because of Ploy, her daughter, the sweet 9-year-old girl I'd been acting as a father figure to for 3 years. We were at the condo on a Saturday afternoon, September last year. I remember the exact date because it was the day before my 71st birthday. Anchan had gone out shopping, or so she said. Ploy and I were watching cartoons. She was cuddled up next to me on the sofa, and during a commercial break she asked me something in that innocent way children do. She said, "Kun Trevor, are you Uncle Frank's friend?" I didn't know anyone named Frank. I asked her who Uncle Frank was. She looked confused, like she'd said something wrong. Got that expression kids get when they realize they've accidentally revealed something they shouldn't have. She stammered a bit, then said he was just a friend of her mother's. I asked when she'd met him. She said lots of times. Said he came to visit sometimes when I wasn't there. Said he was nice, that he brought her presents too. German man, she said. Had an accent like the tourists she'd met. My stomach dropped right there on the sofa. I didn't show it on my face. Didn't want to frighten the child. Just asked her very calmly when she'd seen Uncle Frank most recently. She thought about it, counting on her fingers. Said he'd been there Wednesday evening, 3 days ago. When Anchan had told me she was taking Ploy to a tutoring session, I asked if Uncle Frank came over a lot. She nodded. Said yes, he'd been coming to visit for a long time. Since before we moved to this condo, she said. We'd moved to this condo 2 years ago. This had been going on for at least 2 years, possibly longer. I felt like I was going to vomit right there, or maybe cry, or maybe both, but I kept my face calm. Asked Ploy a few more questions, gently, not wanting to upset her. She told me Uncle Frank sometimes stayed overnight when I was away on my visa runs. Said he slept in the bedroom with her mother. Said he gave her mother money, that she'd seen him do it. Said her mother told her not to mention Uncle Frank to me because I might not understand that it was grown-up business. I sat there on that sofa with this 9-year-old child next to me, watching Thai cartoons I couldn't understand, and my entire reality collapsed. Everything I'd believed for 3 years was a lie. The faithful girlfriend, the reformed bar worker, the woman who loved me, the family we'd built together. All of it was fiction, and I'd been paying for the privilege of believing it. When Anchan came home that evening, I didn't confront her immediately. I couldn't, didn't know how. Part of me still wanted there to be some explanation that would make it make sense. Part of me wanted her to somehow prove Ploy had been confused or mistaken, but I knew, deep down, I already knew. I waited until Ploy was asleep that night. Then I asked Anchan directly. I said, "Who's Frank?" Her face went completely white. She knew immediately that I knew. Didn't even try to pretend she didn't know who I was talking about. Just stood there in the kitchen, frozen. I asked her how long it had been going on. She didn't answer. I asked again, louder this time. She started crying, said it was complicated, said I wouldn't understand. I told her to make me understand. She sat down at the kitchen table and told me. Frank was a German businessman she'd met 4 years ago. Before she met me, he'd been a regular customer at the bar where she worked. He'd become a patron, she said. Used that word, patron. Helped her financially. When she met me, she'd tried to end it with him, but she couldn't because she needed the money. My money wasn't enough, she said. Her family had debts. Her mother was sick. Her daughter's school fees kept increasing. Frank gave her 50,000 baht monthly, sometimes more. She couldn't afford to lose that income. I asked if she'd been sleeping with him this whole time. She nodded, still crying, said it didn't mean anything, said he was just business, that I was the one she really cared about, said it was just her body, not her heart, as if that distinction meant anything, as if that made it hurt less. I asked about the dental clinic job. There was no dental clinic job. She'd been working at a different bar, a more upscale place near Phrom Phong, 3 nights a week for the past 2.5 years. Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday nights. Frank would come in on Wednesdays. That's how they maintained contact. That's when he'd pay her. The other nights she worked for tips, for other customers, for whoever paid enough. Everything clicked into place then. Every late night, every unexplained absence, every shower she took the moment she came home, every time she asked for extra money, it had all been lies. 3 years of lies. I asked her if she'd ever actually quit the bar when I thought she had. She shook her head, said she'd cut down her hours for a few months to make me think she'd quit, then gradually increase them again. Said I was traveling or busy enough that I didn't notice. She was right. I hadn't noticed. I asked if there were others besides Frank. She hesitated too long before answering. That told me everything. Said Frank was the only serious one, but yes, there were customers from the bar sometimes. Not often, she said. Only when they paid well. Only when she needed extra money. As if that made it better. I sat there at that kitchen table, and I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel devastation. I didn't feel anything. It was like something inside me had simply switched off. Like my capacity to feel had reached its limit and just stopped working. I was numb. Completely numb. She kept crying, kept trying to explain, kept saying she loved me, that she'd wanted to tell me but was afraid I'd leave, that she needed both of us to survive financially. Said she'd thought about ending it with Frank many times but couldn't. Said her family depended on her. Said Thai culture was different, that I didn't understand how it worked here. Said lots of Thai women have arrangements like this, that it's more common than I knew. Said she thought I was happy, that she'd been good to me, that she'd made me happy all these years even if I had to share her. I told her to stop talking. My voice came out flat, emotionless. Told her I needed her to stop talking right now. She did. I asked if Frank knew about me. She said yes. Asked if he cared. She said no, he understood it was business. Asked if her friends knew. She said some of them, yes. Asked if her family knew. She nodded. They all knew. Everyone knew except me. I was the stupid old farang who'd been paying to be lied to for 3 years. I told her to pack her things and leave. She begged me to reconsider. Said we could work through this. Said she'd end it with Frank if I wanted, that she'd really quit the bar this time. Said she'd be faithful from now on. Said she loved me. Kept saying she loved me. I told her again to pack and leave. Said I'd give her money for a hotel for a few nights, but she needed to be gone tonight. She started getting angry then. Said I had no right to throw her out. Said she'd help me, kept me company, been good to me for 3 years. Said I owed her, used that word, owed, as if our relationship had been a business transaction all along. Maybe it had been. She packed her things and took Ploy. I gave her 20,000 baht cash for a hotel. She took it without thanking me, left around midnight, didn't look back. I spent the next week in that condo trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't, went through every memory of the past 3 years and questioned it. Did she ever actually care about me? Were there any real moments? Or was every smile, every touch, every word just part of the performance? I'll never know. That's the worst part. I'll never know what was real. I found out more details in the following weeks. Spoke to Graham again, apologized for doubting him. He told me what he knew. Anchan had been working at that bar near Nana the whole time, just as he'd seen. Multiple expats in the community knew about it. They'd all seen her at various times. Some had tried to hint to me about it, but I'd been too defensive, too determined to believe I had something special to hear what they were saying. I contacted the bar where she supposedly worked as reception, the dental clinic. Called them pretending to be looking for her. They'd never heard of her. She'd never worked there. That entire story had been fabricated from the beginning. I looked back at my bank statements. In 3 years, I'd given her approximately 2.3 million baht. That's about 70,000 Australian dollars. For what? For the privilege of believing I was loved. For the fantasy of having a family again. For the performance of a relationship that never actually existed. I found out Frank was 58, German businessman, just as Ploy had said. He'd been paying Anchan for 4 years, longer than I'd known her. He probably thought of her as his girlfriend too. Maybe there were others like us. Maybe she had 3 or 4 men, all thinking they were special, all paying her, none of us knowing about the others until it fell apart. The numbness hasn't really gone away. It's been 5 months now. I still live in the same condo, still do my grocery shopping at the same Big C, still go to the same restaurants, but everything feels muted. Colors seem duller. Food doesn't taste like much. I sleep a lot, more than I should. It's easier than being awake. My daughter back in Australia wants me to come home. She's worried about me, can hear it in my voice when we talk on video calls. But I don't want to go back to Australia. That feels like admitting defeat, like running away. And honestly, I don't know what I'd do there either. The pain would follow me. The numbness would follow me. I see Anchan sometimes. Bangkok's not that big. Saw her in Terminal 21 2 months ago with a Western man, older than me. She saw me too, looked away quickly, kept walking. The man didn't even know I existed. Just another customer who doesn't know he's a customer. I think about the warning signs I ignored, the phone password, the late nights, the money that never seemed to be enough, the defensive reactions when I'd ask simple questions, Graham trying to tell me, my own body trying to tell me with that chest pain. All of it was there. I just chose not to see it. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry. I'm not. Anger requires energy, requires feeling. I don't have that anymore. What I feel is stupid. I feel like the biggest fool who ever lived. A 71-year-old man who thought a 31-year-old bar worker actually loved him for himself. How naive can one person be? The thing about being naive is that it's a choice at some level. Information presents itself to you and you choose to dismiss it because the alternative is too painful to accept. I chose to believe the lies because believing them let me keep the fantasy alive. The fantasy that I wasn't alone, that I'd found love again after my divorce, that my retirement years would be spent with someone who cared about me. I chose the comfortable lie over the painful truth until the truth became unavoidable. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moments when I should have known. When Graham told me he saw her near Nana, when her phone got password protected, when she started asking for extra money every month, when she'd come home and shower immediately, when Ploy accidentally mentioned Uncle Frank. Any of those moments could have been the breaking point if I'd been willing to investigate properly, but I wasn't. I was too afraid of what I'd find. If you're reading this and you're in a relationship with a much younger Thai woman, I'm not going to tell you she's definitely cheating on you. Some of these relationships are legitimate. Some Thai women genuinely love their foreign partners regardless of age differences or financial situations. I'm not here to make blanket statements about Thai women or relationships in Thailand, but I am going to tell you this. If your girlfriend's phone is suddenly password protected when it wasn't before, pay attention. If she's constantly messaging people she won't tell you about, pay attention. If she has evening obligations that take her away multiple times a week with vague explanations, pay attention. If she needs extra money constantly despite supposedly having a job, pay attention. If your friends try to tell you they've seen her somewhere she shouldn't be, listen to them. They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to help you. Don't be naive like I was. Don't ignore the signs because facing them is uncomfortable. Don't convince yourself you're special, that your situation is different, that your love will overcome everything. It won't. Love doesn't conquer all. Sometimes love is just another commodity being sold to the highest bidder. I gave Anchan 3 years of my life and 70,000 Australian dollars. I got fantasy in return. A performance. A lie I was happy to believe because the truth was too lonely to face. That's my fault as much as hers. She lied, but I chose to believe the lies. We were both complicit in the deception. The numbness is still here. I don't know when it will fade. Maybe it won't. Maybe this is who I am now. The naive old farang who learned his lesson too late. At least I have a story. At least I can warn others. That's something, I suppose. She said she quit the bar. She never quit. That's the reality. Everything else was just the story we told ourselves to make it acceptable.